Future Now show. Brought to you by the Club of Amsterdam.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Crehan. I'm from CKA in Brussels. And I'm here today on the Club of Amsterdam Future Now show with Giulia Viero and Ricardo Weigend. And both of those work for an organization called ECOR Global, which is based in the Netherlands. And ECOR provides technologies enabling the circular economy, in particular, the production of bio-based panels. Giulia also works for a research foundation called the Material Innovation Center. This is an international network of partners that are working on new material concepts and new design concepts, again, enabling the circular economy. And Ricardo is just wrapping up a PhD on the circular economy at Scotland's Napier University. So I'm not going to say much more about Giulia and Ricardo. The bios are on the website, and I encourage our viewers to go and have a look at those. We have about 25 minutes together to talk about the circular economy, so we'll jump right into it. The circular economy is something we hear a lot about recently. My impression is that it means different things to different people. So I guess the first thing I want to ask you is, what does the circular economy mean to you? So Giulia, Ricardo, over to you.
Thank you, Patrick. It's great to be here with my colleague, Ricardo. I will start with the first question. And the circular economy is indeed a debated concept by companies and governments and institutions. And I think the easiest way to address it is address it as a new economic paradigm. The circular economy is reflecting, to explain it in simple terms, how the natural system works. Living natural systems, they've been here for billions of years, and their journey will continue. And in these systems, there is no such thing like waste, or no such thing as landfill. The waste or the residue of one being becomes the resource and the food of another being. And this is really at the core at the circular economy as well. And once the cycle of the living cycle goes on, the nutrients are returned of a material, of a component, of a product are returned to the soil. But as we move up in the human realm, we moved from a circular and natural system to a linear take, make, waste model. And this model has a lot of design failures. They say that waste is a design failure, and how the materials are made and how the products are made, it's at the very core of what the circular economy wants to phase out. So really design out waste and pollution. But Ricardo, with his PhD, I think he could add more about the concepts of the circular economy and also the definition that we use in our research.
Thank you, Giulia, and thank you for the invitation to this podcast. Yes, basically there is no consensus about the meaning of circular economy. That was one of my main purposes at the beginning of my PhD, to find out what was the definition that I could start with. And this comes with no surprise, because the circular economy is inspired by different schools of thought. And this means that it's an umbrella concept. But if we want to align to a particular definition, what we choose is the one from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the most prominent think tank around the world. And the definition is that it's an economic paradigm that is restorative by design and which aims to keep products, components, and materials at the highest utility and value at all times.
A very ambitious program, then, if we are looking for a transformation from the old model of the economy, which is a take, make, and waste linear model, to something that is where waste is designed away and disappears. So concretely, what does this mean for companies and organizations and actors in the economy?
Yeah, in applied to organizations, this means that it's a whole new model that looks to have an effective management of resources, and that will completely change their business models, their products, their supply chains for the benefit of business as profit, but also to have a positive impact in the environment and in society.
So Giulia, have you anything to add to that?
Yes, I would also really like to add to try to make it more concrete. As you say, Patrick, it's very ambitious, and most of the time, companies, especially companies that have not started with a core or sustainability core, for them it's really hard to make the transition. And what I would like to highlight is that Ricardo and I, in our research, we focus especially on small, medium enterprises and how they can navigate really the hardship of this transition, because we already are in the transition. We are not transitioning towards the circular economy. This is already happening. But how are we going to capitalize on this model? That's also what we would like to really focus on. Why do we focus on SMEs? Well, our research, we found out that SMEs, they represent in Europe 99% of all businesses and 67% of the employment in Europe. And SMEs in 2020, since the outbreak of the COVID-19, they are the entities that have been hit the hardest. Therefore, a lot of attention has been going to SMEs, but at the same time, there are challenges. And these challenges, to this circular economy transition are mainly on resources. So SMEs that do not have enough resources to make the shift. So mostly, and resources are both human resources, but also capital resources, which is something that large companies have instead. And for today, especially, Ricardo and I, we would like also to bring to the table a couple of very concrete examples, and Ricardo can dig deeper into them to really show, to really concretize, explain what does it mean to keep materials in the loop, what does it mean to recycle, reuse, remanufacture plastics and components. So maybe we can now we can go on and give you a little bit more of context and examples.
Yes, sure. So for me, one of the greatest examples is Heineken, and Heineken particularly in the Mexican market. So Heineken Mexico. I was lucky to have the opportunity to be part of the circular economy transition that this organization made in Mexico. And it moved from having a sustainability strategy mainly focused on CO2 mitigation, water reduction, and renewable energy, to have a complete shift in the system as an organization, establishing a 3-year plan with different steps each 6 months to implement a very holistic approach of the circular economy. So at the first stage, the whole organization around Mexico, with presence in more than 200 cities inside Mexico, the whole teams were educated about the concept of circular economy. And the leadership of the CEO back then, Dolf van den Brink, which is now the global CEO of Heineken, was key. But also, once the employees heard and understand and grasp and were captivated by the concept of circular economy, the initiatives started to come from bottom up. So suddenly you have initiatives coming from procurement on how to maximize the use of fabrics to make uniforms and not anymore to waste every 6 months the uniforms of employees. Or how can we power the trucks for the logistic fleet with biodiesel rather than with petrol. And so many other examples also from human resources, from finance. So that was one of the big difference that it created. And lastly, also from a merchandising marketing point of view, how could we use the residues of their main raw materials, so spent grains, to produce and to substitute merchandising material that in the past was produced with traditional materials that are usually harm to the environment. So suddenly you have a complete shift where you are producing and you are promoting your brands with non-harm, with non-toxic bio-based materials. And then the other example is with Mars. And this initiative was launched today actually in the UK. And in this project, ECOR was key because ECOR was the technology that turned Mars cocoa shells residues into panels, and then those panels were transformed into point of sale that in the UK you can see starting from today as a point of sale in the Tesco stores. So this has a huge impact if you measure the CO2 mitigation, the life cycle assessment of the current material versus the traditional one made of cardboard.
I'm going to ask you a provocative question. I mean, these are great examples, Heineken and Mars, but they're hardly SMEs. So have you examples of SMEs?
Well, I mean, surprisingly, these two examples of big multinationals couldn't have been possible to exist without the help of SMEs. In both examples, ECOR was involved. So in both examples, ECOR turned the residues into applications. So that's the beauty of the circular economy, that you need to involve the different actors. Otherwise, the big multinationals will need to spend 10 years that the SMEs, such as ECOR, already spent on developing the technology with the circular economy in their DNA. The multinationals start many years ago with very traditional business models. So that's why it's very hard for them to start achieve by themselves. But if an external agent comes, teach them about the concept and work together, then a different example exists.
So you seem to be suggesting that it's an entrepreneurial opportunity for young, smart, agile companies like ECOR to jump in and provide solutions that enable big companies to become more circular. Is that the way you see the role of SMEs?
Yes, definitely. That's the role that I see for SMEs. And the role of multinationals is supporting SMEs, not just with capital, but also with their complex supply chains, with their big teams or robust teams of employees, with the resources, and also with the big residues that they produce in their when they want to produce their products that otherwise will end up on landfill.
You know, Giulia, you mentioned that the vast majority of companies are SMEs. You know, certainly the case in Europe, something like 95 or 99%, depending on how you count it. So the examples you gave, I mean, how do you go from a limited number of excellent examples to the majority of companies, you know, being part of the circular economy? I mean, what are the big challenges in this scale of transformation that we're looking at?
I think what is really important, well, first of all, there is no one size fits all. So there is not a simple answer to this. It very much depends also on the support that each SME gets on the regional level. So in terms of funding and grants and support. but also the environment of the number of partnerships. I think that the key word here is really partnership. And as Ricardo very well explained, it's a mix of this agile, very good at performing R&D, small, medium companies that integrate these learnings with the larger companies that bring in the scaling up phase, the commercialization, so that really from moving from a proof of concept to a commercial production. And to address your question, Patrick, I would take it step by step. So I would really suggest, from my experience, from what I saw, is that it's easier to start with a case study, start with a feasibility study, and then move into the proof of concept. So look in the value chain in substituting one material, let it be a toxic material for a better, healthier, bio-based alternative. Track the material. This is very well connected to what Ricardo was also saying, really quantifying the what is no longer, what I do not address any longer as life cycle assessment, but user cycle assessment. So tracking the material during its user time, let it be a chair or a table. And also this quantification needs to happen definitely from the ecological impact perspective. It goes without saying, but especially from the monetary impact, because in the end, we're talking about business. And that is what the circular economy is also addressing, the business part, the revenue part, the circular, the capitalization on these natural resources. So it's a step by step. And if we want to take it even further, when making these changes within the company, we're mainly considering also in our research, but from our experience in the field, 4 areas that one company or multiple companies can focus on. So the first one is making this shift in terms of culture within the organization, looking at one specific product or one specific service, and dig deeper into the operations of this specific product or service, and then take into consideration what can be done in the at the value chain and ecosystem level. And when I say value chain, it usually starts from suppliers. So, for example, there is this example of a startup. I cannot remember whether it's from the Netherlands or Denmark. They work with mycelium. So they work with mushroom materials, and they're able to grow packaging. Well, that's a good alternative for companies that have materials and need to change the packaging that goes with it. It's a small change. It needs to be, there are trade-offs, but that's a start.
Well, just on the packaging issue, there's a lot of packaging used in the world. It's in billions of tons every year, I would say. So are you suggesting that in the future, much of this is going to come from someplace else, from the culture of mushrooms or the recycling of waste? Is this the kind of transformation we're talking about?
I think I can also address that. It goes to, so I think the answer could be twofold. Yes, absolutely. There is increasing demand for these type of materials, healthier, without VOCs, volatile organic components. The market is demanding for it. And there is proof of that, the demand for more clean, healthy, circular products, which is also increased by the pricing of CO2 through, taxes, for example, so through taxation and emissions trading system. So there is a support from the perspective of the carbon market value that makes it really convenient for companies to make this switch. I think the tons of CO2 mitigated, the carbon market value of this right now is approximately, it's between $40 to $80, if I'm not mistaken, but by 2030, it's going to increase from up until $100 per ton of CO2 mitigated. So there is a lot of opportunity over there. But as you say, what are we going to do with the materials that is already in the environment? And that's where also the SMEs come in. That's where the R&D component comes in. What can we do with billions of tons of plastic that are already in the environment? And there are startups working on that. For example, there is a startup here in Amsterdam. I'm based in the Netherlands, that built systems that can be placed in the canals of Amsterdam or of any other cities. And it enables to trap all the plastics, all the waste within these canals. And that is something that started from, I think it was a student. It's a student organization or young entrepreneurs. So that's where the added value lies.
I mean, you mentioned a number of things there. You mentioned the carbon trading system and the price of carbon. You spoke about, replacing traditional materials with new types of materials based on recycling. I mean, this is really a root and branch transformation of the economy, a total reinvention of the economy. You said that it's, simple. I guess at some level it's simple, but it's really quite complicated as well. So tell us a bit more. How are we going to get over the real life complexity of stuff and this kind of a challenge? And how are we going to help businesses really understand where they fit in this totally new system, which resembles very little of what they're used to?
Yes. Well, I think that first of all, the SMEs and the organization as such needs to have access to first understand the concept of circular economy. And then after that, you will have the momentum going and the participation of companies going into that direction. One of the things that we want to address in the approach that we have developed is what we think that the circular economy lacks still, which is an approach towards the future. So we believe that the circular economy is very good at setting a vision, but is still very weak on the operationalization to accomplish that vision. And therefore, we want to contribute with an approach that helps SMEs to define robustly what is the vision that they want to accomplish in line with circular economy principles, but also that they are ready to encounter or to be challenged with alternative futures. So therefore, the SMEs work on doing different alternatives or different scenarios, and then decide which one they want to go or which one they want to avoid. And they work their whole strategies toward that vision with a step-by-step guide.
It's interesting you talk about these new tools. I guess what you're saying is that business schools or the people who are running, SMEs, they don't have these tools already, so there's a need to create those tools. And I guess there's a need also to scale up those tools and make them accessible to everybody so that it's not just something that you do, but the majority of managers should have those tools one day. Is this part of your vision, or how do you see this happening in the coming years?
Yes, definitely. So SMEs are usually consumed by the day-to-day operations, and they have a very strong leadership from the leader of the organization. So what we want to contribute with our approach is that the whole organization participates on building that vision, that they step back, they make a pause, and they start to co-create that. And then that the approach that we provide is comprehensive enough so they can apply it by themselves with a very little of guide from the facilitators, and that they can then revisit every year and adjust those scenarios that they did with the changes that they start to see in the short term.
So when you say the approach that you provide, are we talking about ECOR Global or the Material Innovation Center? Or is it in your ambition as a researcher? I mean, who is the we in this case?
Yeah, no, very good question. So, I mean, the we is Giulia and I, but also two other colleagues, Tanja Schindler and Graciela Guadarrama. We built an approach. We recently published a journal article, and it was presented in a conference in Sweden. And the approach is totally external from ECOR, but we are implementing the approach right now in ECOR, because that's precisely what we want to contribute with inside ECOR, that the whole team participates and became stronger in how they model the future and how they study the future, because they already have the other muscle of the circular economy. So why not to complement it with future studies, as it is called, this discipline, and then start to measure the impact as an approach, and then improve the approach after the learnings from ECOR. So we are having meetings every week to go forward in the approach steps.
We're coming up to the end of our session now, so we need to wrap it up. But from what you've said, my impression is that ECOR is something of a living laboratory for you guys to pioneer and test out these new management techniques that you're developing. I'd just like to summarize a little bit. I mean, when you started, I forget if it was Giulia or Ricardo, you talked about the circular economy as a new economic paradigm. And, you know, when I heard that first, I hadn't realized just how profound and how far-reaching a transformation that we're actually talking about. So this is, and from what you tell me, it's not just about the big corporations like Heineken and Mars. All corporations, big and small, mom and pop stores, SMEs, have a role to play in this. And it's not just the transformation of what companies do, but also in how they're managed. I think that these are the messages that I'm getting. Now, all of those are very important, and they're certainly going to be a challenge in the years ahead. So I'd like to wrap up. I'll ask Ricardo first, and then Giulia. What's your parting comment? What is the takeaway or the message you want everybody to take away from this meeting? Ricardo first, and then Giulia.
Yes, I mean, the main takeaway is learn from the concept of circular economy, be captivated by this concept, then share it with the organization, with the group that you are at. Try to form an ecosystem where you can make this concept tangible into a product, into a service, and then also learn on the implementation of this and share the learnings to a wider community. Start measuring very good the economical, the environmental, and the social impact, and then set different goals as you go and as you progress in this transition.
Okay, Giulia, what's your parting comment?
I think I would like to leave with some keywords. So what we have discussed is create a case study. And this is what we are doing right now. So our approach, in a way, it really can be described as leadership by doing. So we are doing it now. We are creating this case study with ECOR, which concretely can be upscaled to different companies, to hopefully 100 SMEs at a time. Then cross-pollination, so shared learnings, and the global network, the partnership. So I think I would like to leave with this call for action, call for collaboration among SMEs and larger companies. And this is also what we would like to, what we're aiming for with the Material Innovation Center.
Okay, that's a great note to end on. What you're doing is really impressive. It's very important and very timely. especially when we see what the weather and the climate is doing these days. I think it's something that must really resonate with people everywhere. So I'd like to thank you, Giulia, Ricardo, for being with us. It's been really interesting, and I'm looking forward to following your progress and hearing more about your achievements as time goes by. Thank you and good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Felix.